Okay, so you want to understand how someone escaped Auschwitz. You have seen the films. You have read the survivor testimonies. You have heard the names of the few who got out and made it back to the world. Deep down, you have built a picture of what that actually required. Here is the problem. That picture is almost certainly wrong. Not partially wrong, fundamentally wrong. Because what most people imagine when they think about escaping a Nazi concentration camp is fundamentally different from what the Auschwitz complex actually looked like from the inside. The gap between the cinematic version and the structural reality is where most people's understanding completely breaks down. Before we talk about escapes, we must establish a shared understanding of what we are discussing, because Auschwitz was not one place. It was 3 main camps and 45 subcamps spread across a 17-square-mile administrative zone in occupied southern Poland. Auschwitz, I was the original camp, the administrative center. Roughly 40 acres of brick buildings enclosed by electrified barbed wire and watchtowers. Auschwitz II, known as Birkenau, was the extermination center, a facility covering approximately 432 acres with over 300 structures at its operational peak. Auschwitz III, called Monowitz, was an industrial labor camp built directly adjacent to a synthetic rubber plant. Each of these operated under different internal security protocols, different guard densities, and different physical layouts. A prisoner registered in Auschwitz I faced a completely different escape geography than a prisoner working in the Monowitz labor detachments. These distinctions are not minor details. They determined everything about what your options actually were and which of them could realistically succeed. The security architecture of the Auschwitz complex was not improvised. It was engineered, layered, and continuously revised in direct response to escape attempts as they occurred. The innermost perimeter consisted of electrified high-tension barbed wire fencing, charged at lethal voltage around the clock. Beyond that wire ran a roughly 20-meter cleared zone, a strip of open ground patrolled by armed guards and visible from elevated watchtowers positioned at intervals of approximately 150 meters around the entire perimeter. The outer perimeter extended further still. During daytime working hours, guard posts were positioned at a radius extending roughly a kilometer beyond the wire. At night, those outer posts contracted inward, tightening the ring but increasing the density of the watch. The SS garrison assigned to Auschwitz peaked at approximately 4,480 personnel by 1944. That ratio of guards to prisoners was never thin. Between 1940 and 1945, the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum's documented records identify 928 escape attempts from the entire complex. Of those, 196 prisoners successfully escaped and were never recaptured. That number represents a success rate of roughly 21% of all attempts. Read that carefully. It does not mean that 21% of people who tried escaped. It means that of the 928 documented attempts, fewer than 200 resulted in confirmed permanent freedom. The other 79% were either killed during the attempt, captured in the immediate pursuit, or returned to the camp by civilians in the surrounding area. The SS paid local Polish civilians in goods and food for returning escaped prisoners. That incentive structure was deliberate. It extended the security perimeter into the civilian population itself, turning the entire region into an extension of the camp's enforcement apparatus. Now understand what the first 48 hours looked like when your absence was discovered. The moment a prisoner was found missing at roll call, the camp commander activated a search protocol called the Grosse Postenkette, the large guard chain. Every prisoner in the camp was required to stand at roll call without moving, sometimes for hours, sometimes for an entire day, in any weather condition, until the missing prisoner was accounted for. On January 6, 1942, following one escape attempt, prisoners stood at roll call in freezing temperatures for 19 consecutive hours. Dozens died from exposure during that single count. It was the system's primary deterrent. Every prisoner who survived 19 hours of frozen roll call understood precisely what their fellow prisoners' escape had cost the people left standing behind them. The methods that produced those 196 successful permanent escapes fall into recognizable patterns. Concealment was the most frequently used approach. Prisoners hid inside outgoing cargo, in wagons loaded with construction materials, inside the hollowed-out spaces beneath work detail vehicles, inside large industrial containers leaving the factory zones. The key variable in every concealment attempt was the gap between the escape and the discovery. If a prisoner could remain hidden for the full 72-hour extended search window, the large guard chain dissolved and the outer perimeter posts withdrew. That 72-hour threshold was the structural hinge on which most concealment-based attempts either succeeded or collapsed entirely. Prisoners discovered before that window closed were almost always returned to the camp. Those who survived past it had a genuine chance of reaching territory where the search wouldn't follow. Disguise-based escapes required resources that most prisoners simply didn't possess. SS uniforms had to be stolen or constructed from materials smuggled piece by piece through the camp's internal black market economy. Civilian clothing required a network of contacts both inside and outside the wire. False documentation. Work passes with forged signatures required access to the camp's administrative offices or to prisoner clerks with the right assignments. The prisoners most positioned to attempt document-based escapes were those assigned to administrative roles within the camp bureaucracy, the clerical offices known as Schreibstuben. Those assignments were themselves a form of survival strategy. A prisoner who understood the camp's paperwork architecture had information that could be converted into an escape attempt in a way that a prisoner assigned to outdoor labor never could. The most consequential successful escape in the entire history of Auschwitz occurred on April 7, 1944. Rudolf Vrba and Alfred Wetzler, two Slovak Jewish prisoners assigned to administrative functions, concealed themselves inside a woodpile stacked near the outer perimeter of Auschwitz II. They had prepared their hiding spot over several days, soaking the surrounding ground with gasoline-soaked tobacco to confuse the guard dogs that patrolled the perimeter. They remained motionless inside that woodpile for 3 full days. The large guard chain ran its 72-hour cycle and withdrew. On the night of April 10th, they emerged and walked south toward the Slovak border, approximately 80 miles away, navigating by the position of the stars. 11 days after leaving the woodpile, they crossed into Slovakia. What Vrba and Wetzler carried out of Auschwitz wasn't only their lives. It was a 32-page report, dictated from memory to representatives of the Jewish Council in Slovakia, describing in precise detail the layout of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the capacity and operation of the crematoria, the arrival and killing process for Jewish transports from across occupied Europe, and a specific warning that Hungarian Jews, nearly 800,000 people, were scheduled for deportation and extermination in the coming weeks. That document, which became known as the Vrba-Wetzler Report, reached Jewish leaders in Hungary and Switzerland by mid-May 1944. It reached Pope Pius XII. It reached Franklin Roosevelt's War Refugee Board. Whether those institutions acted on the information swiftly enough is a question historians have spent decades examining. Between May 15th and July 9th, 1944, approximately 437,000 Hungarian Jews were deported to Auschwitz. The majority were killed within hours of arrival. The other documented large-scale escape attempt worth understanding in structural terms was the October 7, 1944 revolt of the Sonderkommando, the prisoner units forced to operate the crematoria. These prisoners had acquired smuggled gunpowder from female workers in an adjacent munitions factory, transferring it in tiny quantities hidden under fingernails inside food containers beneath clothing seams over a period of months. On October 7th, they detonated it inside crematorium I-4, destroyed the building, cut through the outer perimeter wire, and ran for the tree line. The revolt was suppressed within hours. Of the approximately 600 Sonderkommando who participated, 3 escaped and were recaptured within days. All were killed. The 4 women who had smuggled the gunpowder were publicly hanged in January 1945. Their names were Rosa Rabota, Ella Gartner, Regina Safirstein, and Esther Washblom. The physical geography surrounding the camp compounded every attempt in ways that escape accounts rarely address with enough specificity. The Auschwitz complex sat in the middle of an almost entirely flat agricultural plain, at the confluence of the Sola and Vistula rivers, with very limited natural cover within several kilometers of the outer perimeter. The nearest significant forested terrain capable of sheltering a fleeing prisoner was miles away across open fields that local residents and German patrol units knew well. In winter, fresh snow made tracking trivially easy and exposed your route within hours. In summer, the long daylight hours compressed the windows of darkness available for undetected movement. The highest concentration of successful permanent escapes occurred during spring and fall months, when conditions offered a balance of darkness, navigable terrain, and roads that didn't preserve footprints overnight. By January 1945, the Soviet Army's advance had reached within 60 kilometers of the camp. On January 17th, the SS began evacuating approximately 60,000 surviving prisoners westward on foot in what became known as the Death Marches. The gas chambers and crematoria at Birkenau had already been ordered destroyed in November 1944. The physical evidence of their operation demolished by prisoner labor under SS supervision. On January 27th, Soviet troops of the 60th Army entered the abandoned complex and found approximately 7,000 prisoners too sick or weakened to have been marched out. They also found 370,000 men's suits, 837,000 women's garments, and 7.7 tons of human hair packed in warehouse storage, waiting for shipment.